Thank you, Mr.
Is there going to be
Spear.
a second round?
We're going to go for 2 hours, and I'm sure there's going to be a second round. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Chairman.
Excuse me, Mr. Scott, let me give the order here. Scott, Kalehi, McLean, Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Martin, you've talked about the reduction from 29% to 23% in the 17 to 24-year-olds that are eligible to serve. The military health systems, named Genesis, might be more appropriately named Exodus. How much of this reduction comes from the change in review of the health status?
Thanks for the question, Congressman. So, as you know, MHA's Genesis is new, and so what I'll tell you is I think that it is beneficial for us because it's helping us see things that we couldn't see before. But what we're struggling with a bit is learning how to live with Genesis and understanding the timelines that are associated with some of these background checks that result from the checks in the system. And so we've leaned the process down almost to 50% of what it was before, but it can still take longer. But what we're doing is we are putting some measures in place. We're committing some resources at different levels. We're asking for licenses for MHS Genesis at the battalion level where medical professionals can access it so that we can see some of these waiver requirements in advance so that we're not waiting till the soldier or the prospect arrives at the MEP station to do that. So we're working with Genesis. We've got a path forward. I feel very good about that path forward, but it has had an impact on our ability to rapidly move soldiers through that process at the MEP station, which typically took about 14 days in the past, and it was about 3 times that when we first started.
If you had an all-state athlete that had a sprained ankle that they were treated for, would that person be caught up in the Genesis system and slow down their process?
Congressman, I'd have to have someone from our recruiting command or from the Surgeon General office talk to you about the specifics of the different checks that they make, but I don't think that would fall into that category.
I've heard serious complaints about the Genesis system and from other commanders and what it's doing to the recruitment. I'd be interested to know if issues like a sprained ankle, an athletic injury that did not require surgery, or something as simple as a broken bone was creating problems in the system with getting our recruits in. Have any of the rest of you got comments on the Genesis system with regard to what it has done to the recruitment? Is it consistent among all of the branches that it's slowing?
Congressman, I'll just chime in. I would just reiterate what General Martin said, is that I believe this is a transitory issue, in that as we understand the value proposition that this provides with the information made available against the processes which we have been using, which may not have had all the exact same data and information coming in, so the recruiter is asked to go back and re-engage, and so that additional time is actually exacerbating the problem of keeping the potential recruit interested. However, I do believe, just like Paul said, I do believe that on the other side of this will allow more rapid access and allow us to be able to match our policies and our procedures with what this capability provides as far as insights into. So I think on the other end, we will be better off.
I want to go back to what Congressman Waltz said at the start about the vaccines. I had COVID. I was hospitalized with it. I was on oxygen for 14 days. And the day I was eligible for vaccines, I got vaccinated. And I haven't had it since. And so whether it's the vaccines or the fact that I had such a bad case, either way, I haven't had to deal with COVID since then. I'm particularly concerned about the way people who had exemptions to vaccines prior to COVID have been treated since the COVID vaccine. There's a small number in our service that had religious exemptions to vaccines that had always been honored until the COVID vaccine mandate in the military came out. The soldiers didn't change their position. It was the military that changed their position in that particular case with those soldiers. And I want to just be very clear that I think that if a soldier had an exemption to vaccines prior to COVID being the COVID vaccine mandate, that exemption should be honored. And it is the DOD that has taken the political position, not the soldier, when they change that. With that, I'll yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. A little change in the order here. Mr. Kalehi, Ms. McLean, Ms. Strickland, and Mr. Moore. So, Mr. Kalehi, you're up.
Mahalo, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Waltz, for holding this important hearing and for inviting the service chiefs to discuss the current state of military readiness in our nation. My question, I'd like to jump to Red Hill on the island of Oahu, and it's for Admiral Kreitz. Sir, I understand that Secretary Austin has directed a joint task force called Joint Task Force Red Hill that will be stood up on the island of Oahu and led by a senior flag officer that will report to the SecDef through Admiral Agolino, the Indo-PACOM commander. Are you able to provide us with any update on the status of this joint task force and its formation?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. I don't have the latest information. I will get it, and I will get it to you. I know this has been discussed. I think I'll just leave it at that, and I'll get you what we have as soon as I can, sir.
Okay, no problem. Second question, this incident at Red Hill that led to a major catastrophe on the island of Oahu that affected over 98,000 military service members that depend and live on the Navy's water system started on the 20th of November. It was a result of a broken AFFF fire suppression line that we now know the Navy installed and contractors installed, violating the Department of Defense's fire code when they installed PVC piping in what should have been a steel pipe through a new fire suppression system in the Red Hill lower adit that was installed a few years ago. The collected wastewater and fuel as a result of a previous event at Red Hill, which happened on May 5th of last year, transported and held a fuel water mixture in this line. We've continuously asked the question, and I wanted to ask it again if you had any information to confirm that the release from the broken AFFF line contained only a mixture of fuel and water, petroleum product, but did not contain any type of fire retardant such as PFAS.
Again, thank you for the question. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to come back to you. I will just tell you that, the health and safety of our people, the families, and our community neighbors is, extremely important to us. We know that we've lost trust here, and we want to be transparent and work with the state as well as the Office of Secretary of Defense to get this corrected. I don't have the information that you're asking for, but I will get it for you.
I'll just add, and I really appreciate that, this has been extremely difficult process, getting accurate information out here in Hawaii to start to restore that trust with the island community. For months, I had asked for video footage that could have existed either from the tunnel system or from an individual cell phone that the Navy for months stated did not exist. And then all of a sudden, about 2 weeks ago, video footage from the actual leak itself on November 20th was released in a local media source here. And so, having transparent information, especially with this PFAS question, is really important because the Navy is now saying that less than 5,000 gallons of fuel actually leaked into the Red Hill well, but it affected so many people so quickly. It's hard to understand how that little amount of fuel affected so many military service members and their families. And so ensuring that PFAS, which is a very, very dangerous chemical, obviously known to cause cancer, was not in that pipe and did not enter the Red Hill well and ultimately was not consumed by our military service members and their families is really, really important for those families to know that. So I would appreciate if we're able to definitively come to an answer that there was no PFAS in that fire suppression system line.
Congressman, I'll get you the information regarding the video. My understanding is that the fact that a video existed was part of the initial report that was provided, or the initial investigation that was provided to the state as well as to this committee back in the March timeframe. It's not clear to me if our, why our briefer misspoke or what occurred there, but I will, I'll make sure that we get the information on PFAS to you.
Thank you. And I'll yield back my time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalehi. Before we move to Ms. McLean, a couple of things. The contamination issues are widespread. Each of the services and multiple bases are contaminated, water supplies and the like. It's an ongoing issue. It's not the principal subject matter of today's hearing. But all of you gentlemen know that we're going to go back through this over and over and over again until, I guess, we're gone. It'll be a long while after we're gone that the pollution will be gone. So be prepared. We're coming back at it. Ms. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. An essential responsibility of the subcommittee is to ensure that appropriate resources are authorized to meet mission readiness requirements. Yet, unfortunately, we consistently lack the level of detail in the annual budget request to conduct this critical oversight work. When procuring a weapons system, there is a single line of funding. There's a single line of funding to develop that system and a single line to buy the system. But to operate and sustain that same system, there are multiple funding lines, sometimes 14 or more, each of which is executed by a different entity and each of which is buried in a larger pot of money so that it is difficult for Congress to have visibility into the amounts or the outcomes. I think it's our job to make sure that we're getting value for our money. And I really think the first question that we need to ask ourselves and answer is, what are the DoD mission readiness requirements in support of the National Defense Strategy? To that end, in FY21 NDAA, we codified a requirement in Section 118 of Title 10 U.S. Code for the service to submit readiness objectives and metrics for every major weapons system along with budget materials, starting with the FY23 request. In our last subcommittee hearing, I asked Secretary Marani why DoD has yet to submit the materials required by Section 118 of Title 10. He didn't have an answer. He said he would get back to me. I'm still waiting. So I will ask all of you gentlemen this question. When can we expect your services to comply with this requirement? And maybe you have and I haven't seen it.
You want to go down the line,
Sure.
So for the Army, I'll have to take that for the record. I don't have the answer to that question, but we'll get you an answer.
Thank you.
I'll just say for the Navy, again, thanks for the question. I think it's important for us to understand and what the outcomes are of the readiness investments that we're making. I think we have that information. I believe, our budget justification material provides most of that, but I'll go back and as General Martin stated, I don't have the specifics, and we'll go back and work with OSD on the policy as well as the Navy to get you a correct answer. Over.
Ma'am, I'll also come back to you, but I will say I want to make sure that we're in compliance with Section 118. I'm familiar with it as far as objective, initial, and then full operating capabilities, objective options, and then full capability options for requirements for a specific system. We always have a threshold and then an objective. Threshold is acceptable, always moving toward an objective. Cost analysis for each of those, and that's part of our JROC process. You must show.
So do you have it?
We have, what I know, ma'am, is per system, we can tell you what that system is supposed to do, what it should cost. What I can't confirm for you is that it's been placed into one bin or one binder in compliance with Section 118. That I will come back to you, but the data is there.
And again, I think it's, and I'll apologize, I'll continue before I make my last comment.
No, I think the same as General Smith. We have subcomponents of parts of requirements for aircraft availability, mission capable rates, et cetera. But as far as having that roll up, ma'am, we need to make sure that we have that in it per Section 118. If there's a format template, I'm not sure that we have complied with that as far as the comprehensive piece, ma'am.
Congressman, we're in the same position. I need to understand exactly what you're asking for and make sure that we provide what it is.
And again, I think our frustration, or I'll start with mine, is we're spending a lot of taxpayer dollars, which I'm happy to spend to secure our nation. But the frustrating piece is we need to go back and we need to make sure that we are getting value for our dollars, and that there's a metric that Congress lays out, which I think is pretty clear. I think it's extremely disappointing that all 5 of you don't have the requirement. So I will ask my second follow-up question is, when can we expect to get it? Because when I asked in the last subcommittee, committee hearing, it was, well, I don't have it, but I'll get it to you, and I'm still waiting. So my follow-up question is, when will I have, or when will we have the requirement by law that you're supposed to give to us? I'm looking for a specific date.
Congresswoman, without understanding exactly where we're at in the process, I mean, it could be today if we've got it, but I've got it.
So when will you have an answer for me on when you will get me an answer? How's that?
I can have someone answer you by the end of the day today.
Perfect.
Similar, we'll provide an answer by the end of the day.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll come back to you as soon as, and it may not be today, but days, to tell you what the time.
How about by the end of the week? Is that fair? We just got to put a deadline or it'll go on into perpetuity.
Okay, let's move this along here.
Yes, ma'am.
Back and forth, not going to work. The information was required by law. Please provide it as soon as possible. A couple of things beyond this one requirement, the Section 118. One of the things that is very much on my mind is that when new weapon systems are acquired, rarely does the long-term maintenance of that system considered. And it absolutely has to be. If we're going to have a bridge tanker, and it's different than the existing tanker, what is necessary to maintain that all the way down the line? And I think this is part of what that Section 118 gets to. Not only the new systems coming in, but existing systems. And to the extent that we can identify them, it may also be helpful. For example, the A-10, what's it cost to maintain it? And that may give us the answer we ought to get rid of it or not. Okay. Moving on to Ms. Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses, and I'm going to ask 2 lines of questioning, and hopefully we won't run out of time. I want to talk about the backlog of housing that exists at JBLM and other bases, and then the Army role in the Indo-Pacific. So I understand that Liberty Military Housing and JBLM are 2 years into a 6-year, $100 million renovation project, and these are long overdue. But after I sent a letter, there was an assertion that we only had a projected deficit of 245 homes by 2025, and as of today, there's a 776 housing deficit. And I say this because I get calls in my district office from families moving to JBLM about the cost of housing and the availability. And we know that on post, we never want to sacrifice readiness or preparedness, but there's an opportunity to build more housing at JBLM. So General Martin, what do you think it's going to take for DOD to add more housing on and off base to adequately house our service members? Thank you.
Congresswoman, thank you for your question, and making sure that our soldiers and their families have affordable housing to stay in is a top priority for the United States Army. That being said, in most of our installations, 70% of the personnel live off post. JBLM is one of those unique areas where the cost of living is very high, and so it's something that's on the mind of the senior commander there. It's on the mind of the partner there. But the numbers that you lay out for me, I can't tell you in this venue with what the information that I have, what their plan is to go beyond that. But as it pertains to the Army as a whole and your line of questioning, we're trying to make sure that we've got the right balance of housing on post that is occupied to the appropriate level so that the vendor can provide or the partner can provide the capability, but also provide affordable housing to our soldiers in a very safe and secure environment. But if you want an answer on JBLM as to whether or not there's going to be any changes there, I can get that for you. I just don't have that information with me today.
All right, thank you. And in the Puget Sound region where JBLM is located, there's a housing shortage of 250,000 units in the entire metropolitan region. So even though they may live off post, there's still a crisis and it's still expensive. So if there's a way to adopt urban land use rules where we go higher and more dense on post, we can help alleviate that problem. My second question is basically around, in the Army's opinion, has the Russian invasion of Ukraine changed Japan's thinking on defense and national security, especially how it relates to Japan's Southwest Islands and how it would play in a possible invasion of Taiwan?
Congresswoman, I can't speak for what Japan's position is or opinion is. That they're gonna follow the rules of their own sovereignty and the decision making that they would make. But what I can tell you is we have a very strong relationship with Japan. We recently had their chief of staff come visit us in the Pentagon, had great engagement with them. United States Army Japan has a great relationship with the Japanese. And so we're talking to them all the time. And in our exercises, we're starting to exercise more and more with them on a bilateral basis. And they're a very important partner in the region, particularly when you talk about the Southwest Islands and what posture potential that gives for them and for us. And so the Army's role in the Pacific, you started to talk about that, but then you asked your question about the Japanese. The Army's got a huge role in the Pacific. Yep. Command and control, integrated air and missile defense, logistics, long-range precision fires, our multi-domain task forces, all part of a potent joint force that can provide a credible deterrent and, if necessary, respond to aggression in the Pacific.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland. Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore, I believe you may not be asking a question. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, Mr. Moore. We now start a second round of questions. There's so many things to get into here. I'm going to take it in a slightly different way. Each of the readiness issues that all of you address within your own service are critically important. And each of those readiness issues are part of a larger multi-domain program. And I'm going to take my questions in that direction. Start here with, I guess, where the first piece of information comes from, and that might be a satellite. Are you prepared in a multi-domain, that is, with each of the other 4 services, to be ready to provide them with the information they need to prepare for a conflict, that is, to be ready, and, if necessary, provide them with the information they need to be able to conduct their operations in a coordinated fashion? General Thompson.
Yes, Chairman, since the creation of the Space Force, we've taken several actions to do specifically that. The first one I'll talk to occurred about a year ago when the Vice Chairman, who is also the Chairman of the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, appointed the Space Force as the integrator for Joint Space Requirements. And so in that process, I am now accountable to the service chiefs here and to the Vice Chairman to, first of all, collect and validate and present to the JROC all of their requirements for space-related information, communications, positioning, navigation, timing, data relay. And so that's the first thing that we've been appointed to do, and we are working through right now the initial phases of what's tactical ISR, what are their requirements. That's the first thing we did. The second thing that we did is institute a force design process through our Space Warfighting Analysis Center that also includes all of the services and combatant commands to talk about the specific designs that will fulfill the requirements and their needs from space. And we have already done 2 of those force design studies, and we have 3 others in work. And then the last thing is, of course, ensuring those designs are resilient and defendable and able to stand up against attack. So those are 3 things that we have done and continue to do immediately to address the challenge.
Just go down the line. General Allvin.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, obviously, it's good to start with the Space Force because, as we know, there will be an increased reliance on space to do just about anything we need to do. In a similar sort of educational journey for our Air Force, we are recognizing that with the changing character of war, that's going to privilege speed and tempo and agility, as well as lethality, that we cannot hoard information or try and make independent actions from the other services. It has to be joint from the beginning. We have something through the Joint Staff and the Joint Warfighting concept that's sort of a North Star, but it really highlights the idea that from the beginning, we need to understand who needs to get what information and when, because whoever has the decision advantage and can keep the opposing side on the reactive rather than the proactive is going to be that's going to, whether it's not decisive, it's certainly going to be major impactful. And so that we see that as anything we're doing from our information systems, our data transport layers in the air, or passing on sensors to shooters, that has to not just go with the Air Force, it has to go to any type of shooter that might be the best one to prosecute the target at the time.
General Smith.
Sir, when you're talking about multi-domain operations, multi-domain effects, I mean, that all of us sit in the JROC, and in support of the joint warfighting concept, that is, in fact, what we are doing. We are a little bit unique in that, as the crisis response forward deployed force, we need an integrated multi-domain element, which we call Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, mimics, or General Martin and I would share, I think, that we looked at the threat in the Indo-Pacific, saw the same threat, and began to build Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, or stand-in forces, multi-domain task force, and I won't speak for Joe because he does so eloquently. That integrates everything that you talked about, from space, Marines who have space qualifications, all the way down to long-range fires, resilient communications. That multi-domain effect has to be achieved by those forces who are forward, present, and ready, who begin the process of disrupting an adversary so the rest of the force can flow behind. So we do that and are very concerned about that. To DT's comment, General Thompson's comment about alternate precision navigation and timing. You have to have it because we will be cut off from space operations for short periods of time, and while they fight to reestablish, we're obligated to carry that mission on in a maritime domain.
You just happened to tickle one of my favorite subjects, GPS. Go ahead, Admiral.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a lot more to add, but I would say that the Naval Service may be the largest consumer of what space brings to the table. With our ships forward deployed, we need to be able to plug and play and be able to do those things. And it was mentioned a couple of times that this is a joint effort. We need to come together to make sure that the systems that we're putting on our ships are able to, communicate with the satellite, but also with the radios that he has or whatever. And so that's an ongoing effort, and I'm encouraged on the direction that we're going. Over.
General Martin.
Chairman, I agree with everything that's been said, brilliantly stated to my left. But I would like to add something that, tomorrow, if we go to war in the Pacific, we're going to go to war with the joint force that we have. And so our thought is every day we've got to be ready, 1, 2, and every day we have an opportunity to modernize, change our doctrine, change our training, is progress in the right direction. But one thing that I'm very mindful of that we got to continue to work on, so you have the most credible joint force, is we're going to go to war with the posture we have and the multinational partners that we have. And that's why engagement is so important in the Pacific right now, because we've got some traditional partners that we've fought with for years and years. We've got partners we fought against that we now fight with. Just time changes. But we need to continue to develop relationships there, because I believe there's a lot of benefit associated with that. And so that's why these engagements, the Security Force Assistance Brigades and what they do, and then the bilateral training that leads to multilateral training. And 5 years ago, I wouldn't tell you that Indonesia would ask us to help them build a combat training center and also help them set up a multilateral training exercise. That's going on as we speak. That's the potential of building these relationships and increasing our opportunities for posture.
This discussion probably would take several hours, which we don't have. I wanted to raise it, and General Martin, thank you for bringing it beyond just the 5 services. It also is our allies and those we would like to have as allies. It's going to require, I want to come back with a series of briefings. Formal hearings are hard to schedule, but I want to alert the members of my subcommittee and other committees that we'll be carrying on a series of briefings on a range of subjects. When we talk about readiness, we're talking about basically every piece of this puzzle except the acquisition of new equipment, which must have a readiness component before it's ever acquired. A change here, I noticed Mr. Johnson has arrived. Mr. Walsh, it is your turn. We'll pass it to Mr. Johnson then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking member, apologize for being late. I was stuck on the floor. I would rather be here because readiness is so important. General Martin, thanks for your time speaking with me yesterday in advance of this hearing. I expressed our concern. I think it's not a concern just that I have, but a number of my colleagues about the recruiting crisis and the challenge that places to readiness to fight and win wars. So the Army's only met, as we understand it, 40% of its recruiting goal for this fiscal year. And yesterday, as we discussed, I think just 23% of young Americans are eligible to serve without a waiver right now. So, of course, barring the over 40% of men between the ages of 18 and 24 who remain unvaccinated against COVID, it makes that percentage even lower. So at least 75,000 soldiers, by our count, currently face discharge for refusing to take the COVID vaccine. The question is, can the Army afford to discharge these soldiers in light of all those recruiting difficulties? Or how are we going to grapple with this?
Congressman, first, I failed Congressman Waltz when I did not give him a number. When he told me 64, you said 75. I tell you, it's less than 20,000. That's still a significant number, and that's why I'm looking forward to improvements. And that number for the National Guard is a little over 11,000, Congressman.
Sure, yeah.
General, I think it's important to be clear here. So what's the total? Guard is 11 and reserve is 20?
No.
Oh, total.
Total force.
Okay.
Total force
is approximately 20 at this point.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, that's a different number than we've been told, so that might be part of the problem.
Well, that's why I did, after our phone call, I said, I've got to double check some numbers here because that was a big number that you had put up.
Sure. Well, if the Army fails to meet its recruiting goal, COVID vaccine or not, will it make cuts to force structure, and how would those cuts affect our readiness overall?
We don't need to do that immediately, but if we don't arrest the decline that we're seeing right now in end strength, that could be a possibility in the future, but we don't see the need in the near term. In the near term, the way we're going to manage any shortfalls that we have is the ways we've done it in the past, where we prioritize formations that have missions or preparation for missions, and those missions will be prioritized to be manned. But that's what we've done in the past. That's what we did back during the surge when we were building structure in the Army, and we had to continue to deploy it over to Iraq and Afghanistan. But that's how we'll manage that.
Thank you. I'm running out of time quickly. I wanted to switch topics to the Ukraine conflict. It's a stark reminder of the importance, of course, of maintaining our military readiness and how quickly munitions are depleted, vehicles destroyed in a large-scale conflict. I had a question for each of you. Maybe I'll just go down the line until I run out of time. Admiral Kreitz, the Ukrainian armed forces have estimated that Russia's fired well over 2,000 precision-guided missiles into Ukraine. If we expended 2,000 TLAMs over a 3-month period, how quickly could we replace them, and what levers does the Navy have to expedite production?
Thanks, Congressman, for the question. I think I don't have the specific numbers off the top of my head of what the production capacity is. I know that we're at capacity today, either building new TLAMs or converting older TLAMs. I want to say it's around 450 per year. Over.
Thank you. Let me go to General Allvin, if the Air Force needed to make up combat losses of that magnitude, it seems the Russians have lost aircraft somewhere the rate of 25 to 35 combat aircraft at an annual rate that's 100 a year. How long would it take us to manufacture 100 fighter or attack aircraft beyond current levels of production, and what would the lag time be?
So that would also depend on the type of aircraft, but obviously as opposed to munitions, an aircraft, especially if it's a 5th gen, is a much longer proposition. So there are many things that go into that. How hot is the production line? Is it out to max capacity? Do you have to do a second production line? So the nature of which production line we're talking about would vary that, but I think your underlying question is the key one. The fact that what Ukraine, I think, has really done is opened up our eyes to make sure that we have to have as much of a flexible and robust and adaptive industrial base to be able to adapt to this, whether it be munitions or on the platform side.
I think that's right. I'm almost out of time, but I'll just say Russia has these reconstitution and production issues today, but of course they could be ours tomorrow. That's the reality. And we're just really hopeful the department is taking a hard look at how we can expand the capacity of our defense industrial base if the need arises. It's a dangerous time. And with my 15 seconds, I just want to say we're so grateful to all of you for your leadership in very difficult times, and we want to be here to support you. So thank you for your time today. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Those issues are pertinent to this committee. When we do briefings in the days ahead, we'll pick those up. Thank you. Mr. Walsh. Your turn. We're going into a second round now, Mr.
Okay,
Walsh.
great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, I think, ask a broader question on aircraft maintenance. The GAO has reported 46 types of aircraft, and I know that's broad brush in their study. Found that 3 met their annual mission capable goals. And I think this is along the lines of Ms. McLean. It's very difficult for us to determine here amongst all of these platforms, the prioritization, the maintenance, how they're measured, and frankly, what to block and tackle and to defend in these O&M dollars. But so that's 3 annual mission capable goals. Granted that the data is a bit dated. 24 did not meet their annual mission capable goals in any fiscal year. I think this most broadly affects the Air Force, where we're seeing 130%, by the data I have, 130% increase in your maintenance and your sustainment goals. And I know this gets at the heart of divest to invest, particularly as your fleet's averaging 30 years old, and you've been stagnating now. I think despite a number of initiatives and money we have reinvestment. That divest to invest isn't a new concept. You've been doing that over some time, yet we're stagnating at around 70%. So I'll start with you, General Allvin. How do we break this deadlock that we seem to be stuck in terms of readiness rates? And I think the chairman perhaps got at it. Are you basically negotiating against yourself, both within the building and then with OMB, in terms of what you come to us in the first place? But I'll start with you, but I'd like to go to each of the services as it pertains. I mean, what are if you could give me your top challenge or 2 in terms of aircraft maintenance and improving sustainment outcomes and availability for your aircraft?
Thank you, Congressman, and I will sound like a broken record, but the age of our fleet, the programmed life cycle maintenance projection, they sort of go out the window once the aircraft is sustained past its design life. And then we find that when it breaks, because of the anticipated maintenance issues with it, we're only anticipated for what would go on over X years. Now when you have X plus 10 or X plus 15 years, there are new and different ways that it finds to break. And those breaks, also, they require more time to be in depot maintenance, and because it's in depot maintenance, you can only have so many go through. So when you have fewer available to make it through, it gets clogged in the depot maintenance pipeline. So part of that has to do, and that is the major one, is every year we try to be able to retire those legacy systems, and every year that we don't, We just don't park them. We try again to maintain them, and it costs more to maintain them. And so all of those things just continue a spiral. And so it actually just gets worse every year, even if we were to put the same or slightly increasing dollars into it. The second is some of the new systems that we have contract logistic support to go with it. And so as you bring on the new systems, there's new money that has to go to that, to even to the new systems as well. But the number one, it is that age of the fleet, because it just takes longer to get them through. The number two would probably be the new onboarding of the new systems. And number three is that our maintenance workforce is still, a bulk of it is still under 6 years. So we're trying to get experienced workforce onto those airplanes. And as we have to maintain more, we can't put our experienced workforce onto the new aircraft. And so they're just still, that experienced workforce is trying to retain, keep them flying even though they're less relevant. But that number one it's the age of the existing fleet.
Thank you. General Smith?
Congressman, I'll echo that. The maintainers, the population of maintainers is key. Having them be experienced, multiple years of service underneath an apprenticeship program so that they become the true expert in their field. When you maintain legacy aircraft, for us, and legacy is not bad. Legacy doesn't mean it served no value, gets a kind of a bad rap. It means it is not part of our future plan going forward. Doesn't mean it didn't serve well. Harriers, phenomenal platform, but they have outlived their usefulness. Our F-18s, we've got to transition to Gen 5 aircraft, the F-35. The longer we maintain those older aircraft because of operational demand signals, those experienced maintainers are still maintaining Harriers when they should be maintaining F-35s, because they have to go through a pretty robust, along with pilots, transition program from one airframe to another. If I pointed to the single biggest challenge, I would say it is the maintainers and the inability to harness all of the experienced maintainers from legacy platforms, because it's a glutch and gas sundown program, and move them to the new platforms. You will see readiness increase as soon as we can divest of the legacy platforms. That's a fact, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think with that, Admiral Kreitz, I'm going to yield to allow Ms. Spear some time before we have to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. You're exactly right. Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again. I'm going to try and do 3 topics, so I want you to be as brief as you possibly can be. I want to talk suicides, accidents, and child care. Let's start with suicide. General Martin, as you know, I went to Alaska and visited both Anchorage and Fairbanks. We were told that you were going to bring a team of behavioral health service members to help with the fact that they're waiting 2 to 3 months to get services. So did the team make it to Alaska? Has the wait time decreased?
Congresswoman, the team has arrived at the end of May is when they arrived, and we don't have data that's mature enough to be able to say, look at the decrease in the wait time. But in terms of physics, it's going to happen, and we'll report out to you as we progress with this so that you can maintain visibility of that.
What's the number of suicides so far this year?
In Alaska?
In Alaska.
In Alaska, you've had 1.
So far this year?
1.
Vice Admiral Kreitz.
Yes, Congresswoman, thank you. I think we're very focused. This has definitely got the attention of SecNav and the CNO. We're focused on the health and welfare of our people. In my opening comments, I made reference to some of the things that we have going on, including moving a number of our active duty medical personnel, both trained in the field, doctors and others, to the waterfront, embedding them on the ships. So I think we're focused here. There are a number of other things that we're looking at.
Okay, let me interrupt you because I'm going to run out of time.
I'm so sorry.
At the USS George Washington, there's been a failure to invest in housing, parking, and quality of life facilities. The ship appears to be grossly undermanned, especially at the supervisory, senior enlisted levels. When it takes an hour and a half to go from the parking lot to get to the ship, that's kind of like unconscionable. What are we doing to fix that? Have we bought a hotel, a parking lot, something to make, because this shipyard's going to be there indefinitely. Are we doing anything about that?
Yes, ma'am. We are, we have offered and moving the individuals or the ship's crew off the ship right now as we work through quality of life issues that you mentioned, such as parking. It is a challenge. We're working shuttle services, but we're also working with the shipyard themselves on a potential to put in a parking garage. We're looking at other quality of life initiatives, including setting up a center where we can get some rest and relaxation. The sailors are, working hard to get these ships out of their availabilities, and we understand and we definitely appreciate their sacrifices. We need to do a better job of providing them the quality of life things that are required.
7 suicides at the USS George Washington, is that correct?
I don't have the number.
All right, I would like the numbers from each of you for how many suicides we've had so far. General Smith?
Ma'am, we've had 31 so far this calendar year.
31 suicides so far this
Across the active and reserve component, the total force, 31. Last year, a total of 58, the year before, 73. So those are the numbers. My biggest concern, and I think you noted it with General Martin's comment about Alaska, is the delay in receiving care. And that comes from a smaller medical community. Active component drives a bigger delay. So that our OSCAR units, operational stress control units, are simply not available to each and every unit who would need them as we shrink down the medical force.
All right, telemedicine's got to be part of the solution as we move forward. General Allvin?
And ma'am, I need to get you the exact numbers. I know that 21 was better than 20, 22 is trending better than 21, but it's still too high. Our strategy is following the White House strategy with sort of building connections and detecting risk. We're working harder on informing family members, making sure the family members can see and identify the risks, as well as continuing the separation of the individual at risk from the devices by which him or her might do death by suicide. So those are some of the projects we're moving forward on, but I owe you the exact numbers.
Thank you. General Thompson?
Ma'am, same. We don't have the same challenges as the other services in that regard, but we know that that's as much a blessing. And we actually are putting in place resilience teams that look after health, wellness, emotional, physical, spiritual as well to combat.
General Martin, how many in the Army in total?
141, that's 25% less than last year at this time for the Army, and it's 14% below the 5-year average, and it's 10% below the 10-year average, and it's just north of the 2019 rate per 100,000 for the civilian population of this country. If you believe that we're on an upward trajectory, the Army could potentially be below that average for the country. We won't know because the CDC doesn't release that data till a year or two after they've compiled it and assessed it.
Okay, I know my time's expired. Let me just say to Admiral Kreitz and General Smith, you are lagging behind the other services in providing child care. Overall, there's 19,000 families waiting for child care. The worst numbers appear to be in the Navy and the Marines. I visited Pendleton just a few weeks ago. We've got to do a better job. That's part of retention. That's part of recruitment. We've got to recognize that. If they can't access child care, they're leaving. And I can't tell you the number of service member families I talked to when I was at Pendleton that said just that. So I'll just leave you with that, and hopefully we can have a further discussion on that. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. Votes are called, so we're going to terminate the hearing here in just a moment. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. There are a myriad of issues. All of them come together to create a force that is ready or not. And so what we need to do is to be informed on the multiple readiness issues, child care, retention issues, all of those. I'm going to put forth a series of questions to you that I would like you to deliver answers to us, some of them in writing, others in briefings, which I'll make available, which all of the House Armed Services Committee members will be able to attend. We've got a lot of work to do. Spare parts, we didn't even get to that. Did I talk about depots? No, I don't think so, not yet. It goes on and on. I thank you for your attention today. We'll look forward to continuing on. With that, we are adjourned.